Hello there and welcome to this short instructional video. I'm going to give you some tips on how to position yourself for the FEES examination and how to hold and manipulate the nasendoscope. With the examination lasting around 20 minutes, sometimes more, then getting yourself feeling comfortable really makes the difference. Okay, let's start with how to position yourself and stand comfortably. Position yourself close enough to the patient so that you don't need to lean forward from the hips. You can stand nice and upright, and also stand with your feet just over hip width apart so that you feel really well balanced and stable. So here I am using the Zion EndoFlex system, which has a video scope, which is a pistol grip variety, which I hold in my right hand, which is my dominant hand, and it rests across the palm of my hand. My right thumb controls the wheel, and that then controls the tip, the distal tip of the scope. My left hand holds the distal tip of the scope, and I'm holding it between my thumb and forefinger, just a few centimetres from the end of that scope. And you'll see then that I rest my other fingers very gently across the bridge of the patient's nose. This just helps to anchor the scope and stabilise it, so that if the patient were to suddenly cough, which can happen during a FEES examination, then I know that I'm going to move with the patient. If, however, I were to hold the scope in this way and the patient coughed, then the patient could suddenly move forward onto the scope, which would be really uncomfortable. So I tend to stabilise it in this way, and it feels better for me, and patients say it feels good to them too. So as you'll see, I'm standing with my weight well balanced, and I'm standing at about 45 degrees to the patient. Some people prefer to stand at a different angle, perhaps standing more at 90 degrees to the patient, just like this. It depends, that's personal preference, but for me I prefer to be 45 degrees to the patient. And then look at my arm, so take note, and I always check myself because it's so easy to have your elbows lifted, which becomes incredibly uncomfortable over time. So I always just check myself and let my elbows rest down towards my waistband so that I'm nice and comfortable. Now to navigating through the nose, and you really need just very small, tiny movements going through the nose. It's fine control. You're going to be using your thumb and fingertip on the end of the scope just to direct the scope down towards the floor of the nose. You're really not using your thumb on the wheel, particularly because you don't want big movements of the tip of that scope in terms of going up and down, not until you get to the nasopharynx. As you're navigating initially into the nose, it really is a matter of the left hand just directing very gently through, directing the scope and feeding it in, and the right hand is doing really small rotations just to direct the scope around the structures. And all of the time you're looking up at the monitor and checking those structures as they're appearing and helping that to give you feedback. You're also looking down at the patient and checking their position and checking that they're okay, giving them some verbal feedback. Here's a summary of those key tips. Position yourself close enough to the patient so that you don't have to bend forward from the waist. Balance your weight evenly between your feet. Stand at either 45 degrees or 90 degrees to the patient, whichever feels most comfortable to you. Ensure your elbows are down and your shoulders are also down and relaxed. Position the monitor so that you don't have to turn your head to see it. Hold the head of the scope in your dominant hand. Hold the distal tip of the scope between your thumb and forefinger of your non-dominant hand. Stabilise your hand by gently resting your fingers across the patient's nose. Feed the tip of the scope through the nose using your thumb and forefinger of your non-dominant hand. Direct the tip of the scope to the floor of the nose. Use really small rotations of the dominant hand to gently guide the scope around the structures. Through all of this, do check back with your patient and ensure the patient is positioned well. So they should sit with their bottom well back in the chair. They should be leaning forwards from the hips towards you. Their chin should be slightly raised. They might need supporting by a hand held at the back of the head during the exam, as often you might position the patient well at the beginning of the exam, but they gradually ease away from you. Do check in with the patient frequently during the exam, ensure that they're looking well, just check in and find out how they're doing and give them words of encouragement. That's it. I hope you find these tips help you to find the best setup so that you can ensure a comfortable examination for both you and your patient. Good luck and thanks for listening.